Good evening.
Good evening.
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 John, hi, Ginger.
Hey.
We can adjust
Hi,
it.
Laura. Hi.
Hello, this is cool.
Everybody. My sister is joining us this evening. I
Hello.
hope that's okay. She was, I think, about 11. No, wait, how old were you? 13 when I started business
Yeah.
school, something like that.
Oh, that's fine.
Somebody has to drink all this wine.
So she remembers
Yeah,
it
somebody
well.
has
I
to.
needed somebody to help me. I couldn't do it myself. So
Referring to.
Down on here with something, no, I mean, something there. Not as close as
Everybody.
Ken Brown here.
Hi.
Hello, Laura.
Wow.
Too far.
Hey. Tom, how are you guys doing? Wow.
Now, did
I think this is a little too heavy for us.
Hey, Marty.
Everything.
There you go. Hello. You can put that on full.
Philippe, is everybody on?
I don't know, Laura, but someone is on listening to something about Bordeaux.
I like that. But I hope somebody's going to tell us about it as well, right?
I think someone is doing their homework as we speak.
Good. That's okay. Cramming is what we all used to do. That's all right.
Terry,
Terry, do you want to launch us?
Yeah, so Laura and I want to welcome all of you to another Fun Committee event where the goal is to raise fund, not funds, and to try to reconnect as many lifelong friends as possible. We saw at the Naples, Florida party just how important these events are. Over the course of 4 days, we had a chance for some meaningful conversations and a chance for a lot of fun. Whether it was golf, Everglades, the Revs Institute with antique cars, the philanthropy conversation that Scott Cook did, the Harvard dinner that Leo Al organized where we had a China expert. The Sunset Sail was just terrific. The dine around that Tom Rogan organized was good fun. And Sunday brunch, you know, on the sand, that's not too bad. And Mario Mahler got us into Pelican Bay. So, you know, we had a great event. We're hoping that we're going to be doing this on an annual basis once we get past COVID. And we really want to thank Roger Harris, Tom Rogan, Leo Al, Scott Cook, Mario Mahler, and Gustav Christensen for really helping put on a great event. One of the things that's really amazing about this class is how many people step up whenever we're doing one of these events. And we can't thank the correspondents enough for the terrific job they do, sort of being the glue that connects their section and keeps them all informed. So with that, Laura, let's have you introduce Philippe.
I would be happy to. I guess a couple of people have asked, why are we doing Bordeaux? Nothing against Philippe. And the reason is that the Fun Committee had really been exploring the possibility of us being literally in Bordeaux this year. And then COVID happened and everything went pear-shaped. So this is as close as we can bring you tonight with our wine drinking. But before I introduce Philippe more formally, I know Terry and I want to give a shout out to Lori Brown of Royal Wines in New York, who seamlessly shipped to 16 states. That's how many states are represented tonight, from Maine to California, Wisconsin to Texas. And so she really did an incredible job. And now to Philippe, a lifelong New Yorker, Trinity College grad, master's in diplomacy from Columbia, He's had a very eclectic job career. He's driven a yellow taxi in New York, Peace Corps volunteer in South America, traded currency options for 14 years at UBS and Bank of America, and then had an epiphany that I think most of us wish we'd had earlier, which is he was going to go sell fine wines. He passed a diploma degree from, I want to get this right, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust of London, and is now the director of Duclos USA, which is owned by the Moyot family, which owns Chateau Petrus in Bordeaux, if you want to make sure we get the bona fides. He teaches an introduction to wine course at Columbia and Yale business schools. And just to show how ecumenical Philippe is, he's also lectured at Wharton, Tuck, and last but not least, HBS. So Philippe, enfin, à toi.
Laura, thank you so much. And Laura and Terry, thank you to both of you, because even though Lori Brown worked very, very hard to get all the wines out, you and Terry worked very, very hard to get all of this together. So before I forget, after drinking too much wine, I just wanted to tip my hat to the two of you. It's been a pleasure, an education, and just a lot of fun getting this ready. So I believe the order of the day is I'm allowed 1 hour to present, and I know that there is going to be a conversation afterwards about what is going on in Napa with the fires, and I'm sure there will be, after 3 glasses of wine or more, or at least 3 wines and maybe more glasses, plenty of conversation. But I would very much like to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. And it is just a ton of fun to see all of these faces. Actually, I have to toggle between 2 screens to see everybody. I would also say that we have, for those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, there is a chat function. And if you want to use that to say hi to friends or ask questions, please go ahead. Typically, it's on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And Laura said to me, we're going to have a lot of people here tonight, Philippe. You know, how are we going to manage this? Should everyone be muted? And how should questions be asked? You're more than welcome to ask questions via the chat. Or if you would like to go back a few years and raise your hand in class, please go right ahead, and I'll do my best to try and see everyone who is interested in asking a question. How does that sound for a sort of lay of the land? Okay. So when we talked about doing this class on Bordeaux, needless to say, and I'm going to put up a presentation if that's okay with all of you. We have Art and Jay Richardson are joining us now. I'm admitting them to the call. How do you talk about Bordeaux in 1 hour? It is the second largest fine wine growing region in that small country known as France. It is a region that has over 2,000 years of history for wine growing. And it has so many different geographic little pieces to its amazing puzzle. How do you conquer this? Well, the answer is you can't. So I have faced this issue before, and I decided, I offered, I should say, the possibility of looking at 3 areas that are important, that I'm sure many of you who like Bordeaux have had wines from before. And they are the areas of Saint-Julien, Saint-Estèphe, and Saint-Emilion, and therefore I call this presentation the 3 saints of Bordeaux, the 3 saintly areas of Bordeaux. And before someone asks the question, because I'm sure it is on everyone's mind, which wine are we beginning with? I will tell you, we are going to start with the Saint-Julien. So this should be the bottle that you have. It is the Esprit de Saint-Pierre, 2014. And this is an illustrious crowd from a very good school, so I might use a little bit of Latin, but we're working ceteris paribus. All the wines are 2014, so that we're on a level playing field for comparison's sake. One other technical issue, and then I promise I won't get technical anymore. If you are planning on opening all 3 bottles, and I know that some of you may be thinking, I'll open one and I'll listen to the talk, and then I'll take some notes, and over the next few days, I'll dig into the other ones. But please go ahead and put the wines, as I have done already, in your glasses, because these wines from this maritime climate of Bordeaux typically are better once they've seen a little bit of air. So if you'd like to go ahead and pour some wine, set the challenge for yourself now. It's as the old expression goes, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And please feel free to let the genie out of the bottle and give it a chance to stretch itself so that it can grant you all your wishes. So I am going now, unless Laura has any redirecting to do for me, I am going to pull up this little presentation, which I will confess to you, I used the alumni group from Columbia Business School, London yesterday, just as a warm-up. They were kind of my guinea pig group so that I could work out any kinks. And here we go. So some of you may recognize this logo from an old television show, which I believe starred Roger Moore. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about Roger Moore, you'll understand a little bit later. So the Saints. But first, a little bit about Bordeaux. Bordeaux, as I'm sure many of, my presentation is, I reworked my presentation to include some stuff about Bordeaux, and I'm going to do something very quickly here on the fly. I apologize. There we go.
He said, let them all. I'm only going to do 2.
Could probably open up all 3 and just record.
Okay, so very quickly, if everyone can see this, this is a map of Bordeaux. And can you see it?
Obviously, he knows this.
Those of you who are unmuted, whatever you say will be recorded and possibly repeated back to you by the folks who watch the recording.
You can see it.
Yes, we can see the map. Thank you.
You can. Fantastic. Oops. So here's our map of Bordeaux. And my family, I am half French, and I had never considered the name until I started working exclusively with the wines of Bordeaux. Have you ever considered what the name Bordeaux, where the name Bordeaux might come from? Anyone take French? We're going to split the word right down the middle.
By the water.
It's by edges, the edge of water.
Edge of the water.
Edge of the waters, plural. So just to give you a little bit of background on the terroir of Bordeaux, we are in southwestern France, and on the left of the map, you can see a sliver of the Atlantic Ocean. Then you have the Gironde estuary, which is the largest estuary in all of Europe. It is so large that there are people who enjoy surfing its tides literally for miles. This is not the mighty Hudson. This is the mighty, mighty, mighty Gironde, which I believe at its widest point is around 7 miles wide. Then you have further down, I can use my cursor, I believe. You have 2 rivers. One is the Dordogne over to the east, excuse me. And then to the west, you have this river here, which is the Garonne. And the way that I always remember this, I'll give you a quick trick that I tell my Columbia students, because we Americans, we're so good at geography, right? We need something to help us along. The Dordogne first over here on the right, and then the Garonne, I say Dolce and Gabbana. There you go. So that's how I never forget which one is which. And what we have in Bordeaux, to really simplify things, is we have, just like in Paris, we have a left bank over here. And then on the other side, we have a right bank. And before we dig into the saints, I think it's important to give you just a little bit of geology. The left bank is a much younger area. And what we have are really soils that are very sandy and gravelly. And essentially, this is all kinds of things that have tumbled down from the Pyrenees. And then over on the right bank, we have soils that are much older and basically formed from the Massif Central. And these soils are clay and limestone rich in the best places. Well, you might say that's all fine and good, but when are we going to start drinking wine? And the answer is, please start drinking wine immediately and enjoy it as much as possible. What's important to know in this geology is what it means for the agriculture. And essentially, on our left bank, where we are going to begin our tasting, we have soils that are warm. We have gravels, therefore, and sand, and these are free draining soils. So here in this maritime climate of Bordeaux, where sometimes the influence of the ocean is quite strong, soils that are warm are a valuable thing, especially if you want to grow a grape that particularly enjoys heat. And if I ask you which is that grape in the Napa Valley, I think most of you would be able to give me the answer. It is Cabernet Sauvignon. And so Cabernet Sauvignon, which is indigenous to Bordeaux, this is where it grows. It grows on the warmer soils of the Médoc, of the left bank. Over on the right bank, clay, limestone. Our last wine will come from the right bank. Clay and limestone are porous and they absorb water. They are essentially sponges, and therefore they hold water, and the soils that the roots are feeding in are cooler because they hold water. And this is not let's call it, it's not the ideal place for Cabernet Sauvignon. And in fact, there's very little Cabernet Sauvignon on the right bank. The right bank is all about Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon's father grape, which is Cabernet Franc. So on the cooler soils, Merlot is happy. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But right now, we're going to start on the left bank where Cabernet Sauvignon is much happier. I'm going to take a step back and remind everyone that we are in France. If you've been to France, you know that the American steakhouse does not really exist in France. If you are going to order a steak in France, it will come with a fine salade and possibly some frites. The concept of just eating a steak makes no sense, and having to order sides of potatoes and creamed spinach and the rest, that is un-French. We need a complete meal. And so why do I say this? Because in Bordeaux, we are not going to find what are known as
Hi, honey.
varietal wines.
Can I call you back in maybe an hour? Are you gonna, or is it?
Mute.
We need to mute Pamela, if
I'll
possible.
call you back. Yep. Bye,
So,
honey. Love you.
so in France, what we see in Bordeaux, now for those of you who are Burgundy lovers, you'll say, but wait a minute, in Burgundy, it's just Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. We're not in Burgundy anymore, Toto. We are in Bordeaux. And down here, we have blends. The wines are all blends. We have 5 classic grapes for reds. They are Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. And the truth is, if you ask a winemaker, they'll say, well, you know, we use all of these grapes to achieve greater complexity. And then if you ask the accountant, he will tell you, or she will tell you, well, you know, we have all of these different grapes to mitigate risk because our weather is not always very good. And so this is why vintages matter in Bordeaux and why they use different grape varieties, because based on the vintage and which grape does better based on how the season ends, they will adjust the blend. Chateau Lafite Rothschild never says Cabernet Sauvignon on the front of it, even though it's mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, because year upon year, the blend is adjusted according to the vintage. Okay, maybe one more detail on the history of Bordeaux. As many of you may know, this is an old growing region. There's only one date that I would ask you to remember, and that is 1855, 1855. I'm sure there are a number of you who know that that is the year of the classification of Bordeaux, at least of the Médoc. And by classification, I mean they went ahead and ranked their best wines in 1855. And the reason that that happened was that Napoleon III was planning a World's Fair in Paris. And Napoleon III did not want the standard World's Fair. He wanted to make some money for France, and he turned it into a commercial affair. Everything that was at the World's Fair was for sale, and he wanted the merchants of Bordeaux to provide him with a list of the best wines so that they could promote these for sale. And so in 1855, they went ahead and classified 61 wines, and they did it in different categories. First growths were the most expensive. They literally did it by price. They looked at the groupings of prices and they said, okay, we have a band up here of the most expensive. Those will be the first growths. Then we have a second tier, the second growths, and so on and so forth. And they basically established 5 layers of cru classé, or classified growths. And we were probably all familiar with Chateau Margaux and Chateau Latour and Chateau Lafite and Mouton Rothschild and Aubryon. Those are the 5 first growths that were essentially established in that period. And one more thing that I like to say on history, I should have a little bit of wine though, is we all need to know that Bordeaux has always been a very international place. We have a deep port. It's easy to get large boats in and out of the port of Bordeaux. It's also a beautiful place. I don't know how many of you have been to Bordeaux, but a few years ago, yes, Patricia, a few years ago, and I know, I'm sorry, Laura, I'm like twisting the knife. Everyone was supposed to go this year, but a number of years ago, UNESCO declared the waterfront in Bordeaux a World Heritage Site. This 19th century architecture, these beautiful limestone facades, it's a stunning city. And I'm going to guess that some of you may or may not know that Haussmann, who basically did the revamp on Paris, he and his architects used Bordeaux as their first draft. So Haussmann, who really was the person behind the opening of the avenues, et cetera, in Paris, that whole architecture group first worked on Bordeaux. So if you've not been to Bordeaux, it's well worth visiting. It's rather beautiful. And then the last thing I'll say is it's a very international place. For centuries, the wine has been traded by merchants from different countries, and it has been exported all over the place. Our company today exports to over 70 different countries around the world from our stocks of wine in Bordeaux. And if you want an indication of how international Bordeaux is, just consider the very French names that I am about to list for you. Right next to Chateau Margaux, in the hamlet of Margaux, is Chateau Palmer. The highest point in Saint-Julien, the hamlet that we will be tasting our first wine from, is Chateau Talbot. We have the Smith family of Smith au Lafitte. We have the Clark family down the road in the Grave region, and so on and so forth. We have all of these different English names because the English have been the biggest fans of Bordeaux for the longest time. And lest I forget, we have the Barton family, Irish, also up in Saint-Julien. And it just may be that over the next decades, we may start seeing a number of Chinese names because the largest buyers right now of Bordeaux Chateau are coming from China. There was a period when the Dutch were very involved in Bordeaux, and another period where the Belgians became very involved in Bordeaux. So it's a very international place. And there's something to be said for what diversity brings to the creativity of this wine region. So I've probably done too long an introduction, but I just wanted to give you a frame. And I'm going to back out because I realize now that I'm toggling between two different presentations. That's an editing issue. I'm back to the Saints here. And here we go. And one more thing on Bordeaux. Think about this. Who got married to Henri de Plantagenet? Eleanor of Aquitaine. Aquitaine, Aqua. Bordeaux, edge of waters. The area that we are about to go into is the Medoc. Medio Aquae. Water, water, water. So it's very funny. The Burgundy folks who say, "Oh, you Bordeaux people, there's always a little bit of a battle with Burgundy. You Bordeaux people, you have no terroir. Your vineyards are too big, etc." It's like, well, I'm sorry. What does Burgundy mean? Because everything about the region of Bordeaux is named for the type of geography that we have here. Just saying. So I love Burgundy. It's gotten too expensive. Bordeaux is much more reasonably priced. Sorry, that was a very just sort of underhanded pitch. So the Saints. So we are going to start with Saint-Julien. And Saint-Julien is, for me, the best place to start because this is the place that I go to if ever someone says to me, "Show me a wine from Bordeaux. All I drink is Napa Cabernet. Tell me what Bordeaux is all about." Saint-Julien is located about an hour's drive north of the city of Bordeaux. And it is, to me, basically the nexus point where you have the finesse of Margaux, which is in between Bordeaux and Saint-Julien. And you have the power of the northern reaches of the Medoc from places such as Pauillac, which is the place where we have 3 of the first growths. Saint-Julien is the combination of the two. So we have the power of Cabernet Sauvignon blends, but then we have sort of the finesse that we would find in a wine from Margaux. Well, why? Why is that? It has everything to do with the soils. Saint-Julien has the gravelly soils that we find further north, and it also has sand, and it also has a little bit of clay. And so we have all of the components. Gravel brings power, clay brings a certain liveliness of acidity, and sand basically smooths out the texture of the wine. It's warm, so the grapes get riper, and the tannins, or the elements of skin that make the wines dry, those tannins are a little bit less aggressive. They're a bit softer. So that's why I think Saint-Julien is the epitome of Bordeaux. And what is Bordeaux in the minds of the people who make this stuff? They're wines of elegance. They're not necessarily wines of overt power. In Napa, we have wines that are in California. We have wines that see the sun every day of the growing season, that get fully ripe and rich and can have real density. In Bordeaux, we have a maritime climate, which sort of keeps things cool. But at the same time, we have a culture that is trying to make food, not a beverage. They're trying to make wine that is going to accompany their food. And so they're not looking for overt power. They're looking to make wines that will accompany the meal. And well, now with global warming, or at least that's what the folks in agriculture will tell you, things are getting warmer. They can make wines that are more and more powerful, but they're trying not to. They don't want to compete with that. They want to continue making wines for food. So Cabernet Sauvignon is the dominant grape in this particular place in Saint-Julien. And Cabernet brings sort of a sense of blue fruits, black fruits. It also can give you a little bit of that dryness of tannin. And Cabernet Sauvignon intrinsically has very good acidity. Maybe some of you tasted this wine and you don't drink Bordeaux all the time, and you may have thought, ooh, this is sour. This is a little bit sour. The head of the Christie's wine department, Christie's Auctions wine department, famously once said, do not evaluate Bordeaux on its own. It should be drunk with food. On its own, it is quite tannic and acidic. So I think given the hour and the fact that many of you have hopefully a kitchen nearby, probably have already prepared some food, please feel free to take care of all of your senses by having some food with the wine. But I
was eating while I was sipping some wine here.
But
We started our meal at 7 o'clock.
That's fantastic. No, that's the way it should be. That's one of the best things about this current way of doing things.
Yeah.
I had a student from Montreal who attends school in New Haven. She went back to Montreal at the beginning of the lockdown, and all of a sudden I'm giving a presentation at 7:30 in the evening, and here she is with her laptop open on the dining room table, cutting her meat, eating it, and then she pivoted the laptop and showed me her parents, who are also busy working on their food and raising their glasses, and I thought it was great. I mean, I can't do that in class. I tell people, do not bring any warm food, hot food to class, because the aromas are going to get in the way of the aromas of the wine. So, bravo. So I just want to raise a glass to everyone. This is the class of 71, correct?
No,
Close enough.
76.
76 trombones and a big boob. Okay.
Don't age us prematurely. We're old enough.
Undergraduates in 71, graduates of
Exactly.
there we go.
There you go.
Apologies. Oh boy, I'm gonna have to edit that from the recording. So I just want to raise a glass to everyone. Thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying this first glass of wine. And just by way of explanation on the 2014 vintage, this is what I would call a classic Bordeaux vintage, an Atlantic vintage. There is sort of a tartness, a wild berry fruit, a freshness to the wines. And this is something that's becoming a little less common in Bordeaux. We're starting to see warmer and warmer vintages where we're moving away from blue fruits and black fruits, and it's starting to feel more and more like red fruits. As the grapes get riper, we get more of that impression of red fruit, but this has still that very classic wild berry fruit, which I always associate with my first experiences with Bordeaux. Would anyone like to comment on what they think of this wine?
He's right about that.
You find it to be mouth-watering. No one will, this is what I tell my current students, no one will remember what you said after all the glasses of wine we're going to have. So please don't, feel free to speak up.
Okay, I'll say something. I cheated a bit, and I've been tasting this one, and then we had a bit of the Sana stuff, and I like this better. How's that? just to jump in, but this is, the nose is fantastic. We're here drinking it, and we have some foie gras and Délices de Bourgogne cheese. So I'm not sure what is pleasing us most, but we find the wine just great. And I know I'm supposed to add all sorts of unusual descriptions and all of that, but I'm just saying we're really enjoying it. And with that, I'll leave it.
You know, I thought that was perfect.
Fine.
Absolutely perfect. And I would just say, because so many people get a little bit nervous about declaring what they smell and taste in wines, I often say that the only judgment that matters is the Roman judgment.
I paired it with my steak au poivre tonight, and it worked very well. I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I would buy it again if it's in the price range that is, remind us, retail 30 to 50, in that range.
This wine, you know, I don't have my phone by me, and I'm embarrassed. I should have the list right in front of me. Since I drink this stuff whenever I want, sometimes I forget what the retail price is. My sales team knows exactly what it is. But Esprit de Saint-Pierre, yeah, I think it's hovering around $30.
Yeah, so the way I think of it is, if it's 5 glasses to a bottle, and at 30 or even $35, I think it's the ultimate affordable luxury, less than a fancy Starbucks latte. And as I define a good glass of wine is something that doubles the value of the meal.
$9.99.
And if so, I believe it's the ultimate affordable luxury.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad.
I just looked on Vivino, and it's $39.99. Quite a bargain. It's great.
There you go.
Well, let's ask John Baker. How much is it on wine.com?
Well, I'm not going to quote that, but I was looking at our app, which you can easily download. By the way, I will warn you, if you download it, it is highly addictive. But I think we sell 34 different Saint-Juliens. And
right?
Yeah, you can get them shipped tomorrow, at least in New York, and you can then sort within that on price. And we have all the ratings, you know, from Robert Parker and all that stuff, and then decide what you like.
So I have to ask this question. I'm sorry, Mr. Baker, are you in the industry?
Yeah, I'm the chairman of wine.com.
Oh, you're the chairman of wine.com. Sir, I will have my resume on your desk by tomorrow.
I don't know anything about wine, but I certainly enjoy drinking it.
Well, congratulations, because I know that it's been a very fruitful last few months for wine.com.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, you can look up the pricing of Petrus as well. So
there you go.
Yeah, Philippe, we're sucking up to you here, because we all want you know, entree into Petrus when we visit, you know.
I will tell you, it is a closed chateau. It's not even a chateau. It's a closed property. But I will tell you, when you go up to the gate, you'll notice that there's nothing on either side of the gate, so you can just walk in. But should there be a trip to Bordeaux for this group, we can have another discussion, and perhaps a tour can be organized. If you're nice to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Philippe, I want to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed this wine. When I turned 25, my husband gave me a bottle of Chateau Talbot from my birth year, which was 49.
Ooh, fantastic.
And so we're thoroughly enjoying this.
I'm so glad. Well, this is one thing I'll say is Esprit Saint-Pierre is really a short bicycle ride from Talbot. Saint-Julien, this is another nugget, is the smallest appellation of note on the left bank. And therefore, if you find a wine that you like from Saint-Julien, you can be pretty sure that you will like the others in that same vintage, because things vary very little. Everyone is close by. They have a very high ratio of chateaux that were classed in 1855. And so Saint-Julien, once again, to me, is it's a go-to. homogeneous soil, a lot of great properties that were recognized, and truly a classic combination of both power and finesse. This is, I guess, an area where we can truly say that around the Iron Fist, there is that velvet glove. As my mother likes to say, and she's French, c'est un petit Jésus en culotte de velours, which means it's a little Jesus in, what is velours again? Velvet shorts. There you go. Spoken from a lady who attends church every Sunday. So we will continue with the presentation. I'm going to click back in here. Oh,
I have to say that this bottle of wine went very well with the beef bourguignon that I prepared tonight. And
see,
it tastes a little different now that the plate is taken away. So
it tastes a little bit different now that the plate has been taken away.
it tastes a bit sharper.
A little bit sharper. Well, again, that is true. And back to Michael Broadbent's comment, don't judge it without food. It is supposed to bring to the meal a sort of a refreshing character. I know that I have to watch the time, but I cannot help but tell you about one of my favorite New Yorker cartoons, which is in a cellar. And I'll send it around in a follow-up email. In a cellar, we see wine being made, and there's a French couple, Pierre and Marie, stomping grapes. Pierre with his beret, Marie wearing her old flowered dress. And in the next vat, just down the way, you see all of these naked people hot tubbing in a big vat of grapes. And the caption of the cartoon is, Marie, have you not seen California wine being made before? French wine takes a lot more effort. We don't have the Eden that is the weather and the soil in Napa, Sonoma, etc. It takes a little more effort, and there is a little bit of that Gallic edge to our Cabernets and Merlots in Bordeaux. But if everything were the same, it wouldn't be as interesting. And I'm delighted that you're having this wine with Boeuf Bourguignon, because it gives me the opportunity to say, cook with Burgundy wine, drink it with Bordeaux wine, or eat it with Bordeaux wine. Anyway, again, that little battle between Burgundy and Bordeaux. So I will continue here with your permission, because we have a few wines to get through, but just saying a few more things. Now I think I'm back. This is the presentation. I just had my first slide off, but all of this, oh, and there's a spelling error. That's terrible. I will send this presentation on to all of you if you're interested. And if we didn't read off of this before, I think I've basically said everything that's here. The best sites are near the Garonne River. Why? Because the climate is a little bit more temperate at the end of the season, and that makes for wines that see a little bit more ripeness. So when you do go and visit Bordeaux, stay on the right side of the road. Stay on the side where the chateaux are closer to the water. If that's the only thing you remember, you will visit the best chateau. Okay. The big guns in this area, besides Saint-Pierre, we have Du Cru Beaucaillou, Chateau Becheval, Léoville Barton, of the great Irish Barton family, and perhaps my favorite Bordeaux of the left bank, Léoville Las Cases, which really should have been a first growth in 1855. I think they didn't hire the right lobbyist. And second labels, just if you don't want to make the spend on these big wines, these are the names of their second labels. Okay, here are some of the labels. By the way, Chateau Becheval, which you can see down here, this is one of the favorite wines in China because of the dragon boat. That property has taken off since 2008. The dragon boat makes all the difference. And it's a very good wine. And Saint-Pierre, which we've just had, for those who are curious, fourth growth, 75, this is the planting of the property, 75% Cabernet Sauvignon. So we are clearly in Cabernet Sauvignon country, 15% Merlot and some Cabernet Franc. Time in oak, roughly 16 months. The property dates back to the 16th century. So this is one of the younger properties. And I'm sure that some of you might be familiar with Chateau Gloria, which is not a cru classé, it's a cru bourgeois. Chateau Gloria is owned by the same folks, and it is a very popular wine here in the States, probably because it doesn't have a really difficult to pronounce French name. You chuckle, but it is true. The style for these wines is typically elegant, but a little bit riper than some of the neighbors. Fairly suave tannins. I didn't sense real dryness. Red and black fruits, a little bit of savoriness, and some lingering black fruits. So, Deborah, there you go. You liked it, and I just filled in all that other stuff. Okay, so now we're going to go to Saint-Estèphe. And Saint-Estèphe is further north. It is further north on the map. I could scroll back. Why don't I do this? Don't look at the screen for a second because you might get dizzy. I'm going to scroll back to the map. Here we go. We are in this zone. If you can see my cursor, we're in this zone right here. And Margaux is down here. And then you have Saint-Julien, Pauillac, and Saint-Estèphe. Now, what I'm going to tell you about Saint-Estèphe is that even though it's only a little bit north, there's something that happens in the soil that changes things quite a bit. The soils have, there are gravels, but in Saint-Estèphe, we have quite a bit of clay, and we also have limestone. It's the only place that I know of on the left bank where that band of limestone that is really in Saint-Emilion goes under the estuary and comes back up. So not only do we have colder soils, but the estuary is wider and the Atlantic is coming in a little bit too. And so it's rather cool. And so the wines tend to be a little bit cooler in their, let's say, personality. They're not as easy to enjoy. They have higher acidity levels. They typically have higher tannin levels. This, despite the fact that there's quite a lot of Merlot being grown here because of clay and limestone being the right soils for Merlot. So we have as our second wine, a wine from Lafont Rocher, which is another fourth growth. And what else should we say about Saint-Estèphe? And again, don't look at the screen. I'm going to quickly scroll back down. Here we go. Saint-Pierre, Saint-Estèphe. Notice that if you remember, in Saint-Julien, out of roughly 24 growers, there are 11 that were classified in 1855. Up here in Saint-Estèphe, 74 properties, but only 5 that were classified. Part because they're further away from the city of Bordeaux. And back in 1855, that was a much longer ride on a horse. And it was more difficult to get the wines to market. So although a lot of wine would make it downriver. There is no first growth. Saint-Julien and Saint-Estèphe, neither one has a first growth. All the first growths are in Margaux, Pauillac, and another place called Pessac-Léognan. What else should we say? This is a place to watch. Why do I say that? Because what we find is as things are getting warmer, Saint-Estèphe wines, which before had difficulty achieving ripeness, are all of a sudden becoming ripe and more accessible. And we really saw this in spades. I'm sure some of you remember in Europe in 2003, and in fact in California too, we had a heat wave. It was very, very hot in 2003. And if you drink wines from Bordeaux that are from the 2003 vintage, most of them are not very good. Most of them have cooked fruit flavors and aromas, don't have much acidity, they're a little bit flat
Hmm.
and a little bit baked. But Saint-Estèphe produced brilliant wines in 2003 because they had those cooling breezes, and they also have soils that hold some more water, and that kept the plants hydrated and happy. So
2019 was a very hot summer in France, too.
2019 was a very hot summer in France.
But
The difference is
That hasn't been released yet, no doubt.
it's been released as futures, and it was released this spring, and it actually turned out to be a very good deal because most producers didn't even know whether they should wait for people to come and taste the wines. There was so much uncertainty, and actually a member of the family that produces this wine was the first major chateau to come out with a price, Monsieur Tesseron down at Pontet-Canet. And I think he reduced his price on the 19, which is probably a better vintage than the 18. He cut his price by 33%. And so he set the tone, and the 2019s are actually good value. The difference in 19 to 2003 is it wasn't as hot at night. Grapes, like human beings, like a little bit of rest. If you like sleeping with the windows open because it's nice and cool, this is the way grapes like to evolve too. If it is constantly hot, they lose their acidity fairly quickly. And in 2019, there were decently cool nights, which sort of gave the grapes some relief. Not the case back in 03. So Saint-Estèphe, 2009 also, another one where it was quite hot. What else should we say about Saint-Estèphe? Here are some, I list La Font Rocher as one of the sleepers, but you may be familiar with some of these wines. There's Chateau Montrose. It literally was a hill of roses until right before, not long before the classification. And so it really should have been a first growth, but the vineyard was still very young. Then you have Costesternel, very famous super second property. Calon Ségur, which is the wine, the label with the heart. I'll show it to you in a moment. And La Font Rocher, which is generally considered to be a sleeper. So what are we expecting in this wine? I think Deborah always running ahead, especially when it comes to wine, evaluated wine number 2 and number 1, while all of us were focusing on 1, and declared wine number 1 more interesting than number 2.
Le vin numéro 2, c'est moins, it's not as strong, c'est moins fort.
Moins fort.
Yeah, it's just, it's not quite as distinctive, I think, in my view. But I'd rather hear your view than my view.
Well, it's interesting because I see what you mean. It's not as strong, perhaps, in its fruitiness, but it is stronger. It is stronger in its grip. That wonderful word that the Brits use to describe wines that have sort of a tannic hold on our tongue. I'm feeling the dryness at the end. And when I taste a wine like this, there's only one thing that I think about, and it's exactly what they think about up in the Médoc, and that is grilled lamb. This is a wine that would go superbly with grilled lamb. It is mineral. We're not tasting fruit as much as we're tasting the terroir, the soil. There isn't a ripeness of rich and caressing fruit. It's much more earthy. And I'll never forget asking a winemaker in Bordeaux whether they thought that California would pose a risk to their position in the world of wine. And they said, no. California wine is all fruit. Here in France, if we want fruit, we go down to Le Marché, in the Place, par l'Église. We are making vin. We are making wine. We want to taste something that tastes of the soil. And I think in this wine, we're getting something that is much closer to the soil.
Okay, I like it better already, especially with your description of la caresse. That makes me really like it better. Thank you.
Well, it's very interesting because I said at the beginning, please put the wine into your glasses. I put this wine into the glass immediately before logging on because I knew that it was going to require a little bit more. But I think that when I talk about places and wines, I like to tell my students, I like to give them some images. And I was in Saint Estèphe last year in September, or no, it was October of 2019. And we had visited in Margaux, we had visited in Pauillac, we had visited in, Margaux, Saint-Julien, and Pauillac. And we finally got to Saint Estèphe and we got out of the van and we took the van to basically the edge right by the estuary to show our colleagues that we brought over from the US. And we all put on our sweaters or jackets because all of a sudden things got cooler. And you get this sense of kind of coolness in the wines of Saint Estèphe. They're not as generous. They're a little bit more northern. You know, it takes a while for them to warm up. So sometimes it makes sense to get the wine into the glass and let it breathe a little bit to become a little more generous.
Philippe, how long do you normally suggest to aerate the wine prior to serving?
So this question is a very subjective question because tasting things is very much a subjective exercise. What I will say as kind of a rule of thumb, if the Bordeaux is less than 10 years old, and I'm sticking to Bordeaux here, if it's less than 10 years old, I like to put it into a decanter at least half an hour before I start tasting it. I like to give it a chance to stretch out a little bit. And these wines have, when they're less than 10 years old, they have a structure of that skin tannin, that dryness that you feel, which is an antioxidant. So it can deal with air without falling apart. Older Bordeaux, if it's 40, 50 years old, which is still not the oldest Bordeaux, drinkable Bordeaux, you know, I recently did an event for charity in our office, and we had 10 decades of a particularly good chateau, and the 1890 was great, but we opened the bottle and we started drinking it pretty quickly. So Bordeaux can last a long time. And I know I'm sort of moving around here on your question. I would say for most of the Bordeaux that we drink, if it is not older than 10, 15 years, half an hour, pour it into a decanter, great. And the other thing that I would say, and I repeat this over and over and over again, and I do a lot of business, or at least I used to, with fine dining restaurants, it's absolutely essential to serve the wine a little bit cold because it's going to warm up. And if the wine needs a half an hour to sort of, or an hour to open up, you may as well give it a chance by serving it a bit cold, because it is going to warm up and you don't want to drink it warm. You want to have it still be a bit fresh. So always serve your wine a little bit too cold unless you are rushing to drink it, because it can only be a positive thing. Unless you live above the Arctic Circle, then I would say maybe you should reconsider that strategy.
A question, Philippe.
Oui.
So before you leave the left bank, I've always wondered, why is Grave considered a separate region from Médoc?
So Grave, thank you for your question. The Grave is the gravel area to the south of Bordeaux. It's basically, Bordeaux is sort of that fulcrum point. To the north, right, is the Médoc, and then the Grave, and then you have Sauternes and all of that to the south. The Grave, I need to do a little bit more research, but it is interesting to note that the Grave was not classified in 1855. I'm not quite sure why. Only one property from the Grave made it into the classification, and that was Chateau Aubryon, or as Samuel Pepys wrote in the 17th century in London, O'Brien, and it was classified because the merchants of Bordeaux knew that the English had already acquired a great taste for this wine from the Grave. So they admitted it into the classification, even though they really didn't look at it. The other thing about the Grave is that it is very much a white wine growing region. And if you are familiar with the French attitude towards wine, le premier devoir d'un vin, c'est d'être rouge. The first job of a wine is to be red. And because in the Grave, there is so much white wine growing, perhaps they considered it, that wrong side of the tracks area. So that's as much as I can say but eventually they did classify the Grave, but it was literally over a century after the classification of the Médoc. Can I leave it there? Because I can probably go a little bit deeper, but I want to respect the time. So we are going to switch from the Médoc over to the right bank, but a few more things. Here are some labels from Saint-Estèphe. And if you look over here, we have Calon-Ségur, which is famous for this heart shape on the label. It is probably in fine dining restaurants all over the world, the most ordered bottle of wine for Valentine's Day. Early February, we always put out an offer on Calon-Ségur. Mr. Baker, take note, you can move a lot of Calon-Ségur if you mention it at the beginning of February. And the reason that the heart is on the label is because the Marquis de Ségur, back in, I think it was the 18th century, he was the owner of Calon. He was the owner of, if I'm not mistaken, Mouton. And he was also the owner of Latour. And the famous quote is, Je suis propriétaire à Mouton et à Latour, mais mon cœur est à Calon. I am the owner of both Mouton and Latour, but my heart is at Calon. And so that is why Calon is maybe the most well-known Saint-Estèphe, because of that heart shape on its label. And La Font Rocher, which we just tasted, it is unusual in the Médoc for being planted to mostly Merlot. This is not the case on the left bank, but it is a nice transition over to the right bank because we're going to get into even higher percentages of Merlot. In this, I think this over here, this is not correct. I apologize. I will adjust that. This wine is not 60% Cabernet Sauvignon. It is probably 60% Merlot. And this is considered to be one of the best values. I should also point out that this is one of the few properties of the Cru Classé that is still owned by a family. It's owned by the Tesseron family. And I mention them because some of you may be familiar with their other very fine wine from Chateau Pontet-Canet down in Pauillac. But some of you who do not care about wine may be familiar with their outstanding cognacs. The House of Tesseron, for years and years and years, was sort of the little gold mine that our friends at LVMH would go and pluck old cognacs from their Paradis to put into their best cognacs. And finally, Alfred Tesseron, he's not exactly the new generation, but he said, why are we selling everything to LVMH? Let's bottle our own stuff. So if you're cognac fans, I would just mention that the same family that produces this wine produces the best cognacs, bar none, at least in my humble and perhaps not so educated opinion when it comes to cognac. All right, Saint-Emilion. So Saint-Emilion, we are on the other side of two rivers. I once had to make it from Chateau Margaux over to Saint-Emilion in less than an hour, and I got very, very lucky that the bridges were clear, because it's not la porte à côté. It's not right next door. And Saint-Emilion, this is a different place. Bordeaux is not small. And here, as I mentioned earlier, we have soils of clay and limestone in the very best places. I don't know how many of you have been to the little village of Saint-Emilion. Anybody, has anyone been to Saint-Emilion? Stunning, bucket list, absolutely gorgeous. The church in Saint-Emilion, I think, was started in the 11th century and finished in the 16th, something like that. It's just this perfect little little enclave, all made of pale limestone, all quarried right around there because they're on limestone. It was very simple. They cut the limestone out of the soil. They didn't go into, they left the top level where the vineyards were, and they just went underneath and cut out the limestone, and then that allowed for plenty of space to store the wine. Win-win. And Saint-Emilion is another World Heritage Site by UNESCO. And we are on a hillside, again, that is a limestone hillside, and there are still traces of Roman roads. In fact, the most famous property, and perhaps, and I think it is my favorite Saint-Emilion property, is Ausone, A-U-S-O-N-E, and it was named after the poet Ausonius, so Roman poet who lived in the area. So there's a very long history there. The predominant grape is Merlot, and the sort of backup grape or supporting actor of importance is Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc, which again, father of Cabernet Sauvignon, and also the predominant grape up in the Loire Valley. We must be very careful as consumers about the wines of Saint-Emilion. Everything in Saint-Emilion is Grand Cru according to their very lax rules. It might be because they had a hard time selling this stuff. They weren't on the port. They had to wait for the rail to finally help them get distribution. And so they decided, how do we market ourselves? We're going to say that everything is Grand Cru. So when you buy a wine from Saint-Emilion that says Grand Cru, that means nothing, unless you're buying it to impress someone who you don't want to spend a lot of money on. Grand Cru Classé is what matters. It should have been classified by the committee that gets together every 10 years, because this is another particularity of Saint-Emilion. If the 1855 classification in the Médoc is like the tablets brought down from the mount by Moses, immutable, they do not change, that ranking has stayed the same. In Saint-Emilion, they made the error of being smarter than they thought they were, or less smart than they thought they were, and they decided that every 10 years they would do a new classification. The only people that this has benefited are the attorneys, because people sue when they have been demoted. And so it's a little bit tricky in Saint-Emilion, but
Regulated.
So are we anti-regulation? It's overly, there's too much churning. There's too much lobbying in Saint-Emilion. So
Soccer clubs get regulated when they're at the bottom, so.
Soccer clubs get regulated? Is that right?
Relegated.
I think it's relegated.
Relegated. Well, that's it. Some properties in Saint-Emilion every 10 years get relegated, and then they lawyer up. Anyway, what we're drinking is Grand Cru Classé, and it's a little bit tricky because there's Grand Cru Classé, that just means it's been recognized as worthy of classification. Then there is Premier Grand Cru Classé B, the B team, and then at the top there's Premier Grand Cru Classé A, of which there were only two for the longest time, Chateau Cheval Blanc and Chateau Ausone. And then in 2013, some really good lobbying from some new, very, very wealthy owners took Chateau Angelus and Chateau Pavie into the higher sort of air of Grand Cru Classé A. So we have a wine from an estate called Grand Corbin d'Espagne. The family is the d'Espagne family. They've been making wine there for 7 centuries. And more importantly, we are in the land of Merlot. So I don't know if everybody has poured themselves some wine, but I've pulled out a different shaped glass, more of a burgundy glass, and I'm going to pour myself a little bit of this. And if you are a color person and you look at the color, it is a lighter color. And the reason that this wine is a lighter color is because we are working with a skin that, or a grape that has lighter skin. It's not as thick as the Cabernet skin. And so we should expect, since skin gives color to the wine, we should expect a lighter color, and we should also expect less tannin, because the skins are what give that skin dryness to the wine. And the grape is Merlot, and so the fruit is going to be much more red fruit. Why? Because thinner skin, easier to get ripe, and in fact, it doesn't have a lot of acidity, so you don't have to get it super ripe, because it just doesn't, you don't want to get it super ripe because it doesn't have a lot of acidity. And if anyone here is familiar with the movie Sideways, did anyone see that movie Sideways that made Pinot Noir and destroyed Merlot? Basically, the prices of bulk Merlot in California went down by 75%. Well, the reason that Miles did not like Merlot is because it's too hot in many places in California to grow Merlot. This grape starts out its life with not much acidity. If you put it through too much heat, it loses the little bit of acidity that it has, and now you have pancake syrup. So there are only 2 places on the planet where this grape grows well. It's the right bank of Bordeaux, and anyone know the other place? Anyone an Italophile, like Italian wines? Tuscany. Tuscany has some 100% Merlots, Super Tuscans, that are absolutely stunning. So Merlot is a little bit of a princess in the pea. She needs things to be just right. Therefore, she lives on the right bank. And Cabernet Sauvignon, it's hardy. It will deal with all the heat, with the sun, the rest of it. You can leave it alone. Left alone, it performs. Left bank, Cabernet Sauvignon. Just a little device to remember what is where. So Grand Corbin d'Espagne, has everyone tasted this wine?
Yeah, it's good.
Is it different than our other 2 wines? Laure Aubuchon, your name is so French. You must have an innate sense of what is good in wine. How is it different for you?
Well, it's much softer, you know, and again, you could almost see drinking this more on its own than the other 2, but the lack of the acidity, I mean, it now that you compare the 3, that it really hits home. And my sister, that was her favorite wine, so was this one. So
the wines of Saint-Emilion are very caressing. And in fact, when you look at the statistics, the 2 categories of Bordeaux that are the most popular on restaurant lists, or at least on top flight, sort of Zagat rated restaurant lists, the 2 appellations that see the most listings are Saint-Emilion and Margaux. And it's because Margaux has the easiest time ripening its grapes, and Saint-Emilion with Merlot has a very easy time as well. And so we have these wines that are rounder, a little bit riper, more caressing tannins versus astringent tannins. Oh, I'm loving the McGookie's dog. This is a dog that has good taste.
Yes.
And so, yes, in fact, a lot of people who are getting into Bordeaux, if you want to take someone who says they don't like that European stuff and you want to ease them into Bordeaux, Saint-Emilion is probably the easiest way to get them started. And I find this wine, as you said, Laura, to be very easy to drink just on its own.
He's in the business.
red fruited, almost sweet. There's almost an impression of sweetness from that red fruit. Now, very quickly, because I'm sure some of you will be interested in this, Merlot, unfortunately, is starting to see weather that's a little bit too warm on the right bank. And we see properties, even top flight properties like Chateau Ozone. I mean, this is the leader in Chateau Ozone and Cheval Blanc are really the two leaders in the area, but Chateau Ozone is really, that's in the sort of central part of Saint-Emilion. That's in the district where most of the properties, top properties are. Cheval Blanc is kind of an outlier. Cheval Blanc actually almost abuts Petrus. It's off in the western section of Saint-Emilion, and it's kind of its own thing. Ozone is the beacon, and these folks, who I know well, the Vautier family, about 7 years ago, they started a program to replant their vineyards slowly, and they're replanting it to take it from 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc to 65% Cabernet Franc, 35% Merlot. That is remarkable. This is, again, the top rated chateau in Saint-Emilion, and they are completely inverting the ratio of the grapes that they're growing. And essentially is because they recognize what is going on. The reason that they are so well known is because they have the best terroir. The best terroir used to mean the terroir that could get the ripest. They have this beautiful steep slope that faces due south. This has become a problem. I'm not here to, talk about climate change, but I'm just telling you, it's very interesting because we're going to see these wines starting to shift. And Cabernet Franc is a beautiful grape, which brings a lot of aromatics. It isn't as voluptuous as Merlot. It's going to be a little bit different.
Do you think Merlot may even change to being more predominant in Loire Valley or even further north?
This could
or even England?
This could happen. This could happen. I think that's a great point, Mr. Brown. If you look at what's going on in southern England right now, there is outstanding sparkling wine being made in southern England. The Champenois are buying land. White Cliffs of Dover, that is the same chalky soil that you find in the best sectors in Champagne. And now it's become viable. So yes, things are moving north. And we see in German Rieslings, we see producers producing bone dry Rieslings. This is not the classic hock, as they say in England, where it was always sweet wine to counterbalance the almost battery acid-like acidity that you would get in that northern growing area of Europe. But now the youngsters are making dry wine because the grapes are getting riper. We may see a time when Belgian wine starts making a comeback. The reason that the Belgians bottle their beer under cork is because before the Middle Ages, it was warm enough to produce wine, and they did. And then it became too cold to produce wine. It's going to start creeping up again. So anyway,
I'm talking about the taste. With
yes.
The Cova, would you? I don't think of this as fruit forward, however.
Well, isn't that a good thing?
Exactly. The California I think of as much more fruit forward. In fact, most people say the American market likes fruit forward, but
right.
But to me, this is software. I know you say it's red. You say it's sweeter, but I'm trying to think whether sweeter connotes. I guess fruit has a certain acidity to it as well. So I always have a problem using words to describe taste. I'm still trying to figure out what a tannin is.
So I will, because this is one of the questions, I talk about it a little bit freely, and I talk about the dryness. Tannin is an element in the skins of the grapes that is there, I think, naturally. Nature is about reproduction. Grapes have seeds. The whole idea is to get the seeds ripe and the fruit ripe so that birds will eat the fruit, ingest the seeds, help the seeds to break down a little bit, poop out the seeds, and then we get plants growing again. What we have is a sweetness that comes from, I kind of lost track. I've had a little bit of wine, but we have a fruit here that tastes sweeter relative to the other wines that we've been tasting. Is it as sweet as some of the, I love the description earlier about relative to a mochaccino from Starbucks is their value. We have wines in the New World, whether it's Argentina, Chile, California, Australia, that taste like mochachinos. They're so sweet. But here, it's just sweeter relative to the Cabernet. I kind of lost track. Oh, I know what I wanted to say about tannin. That's what I meant to. That was the track I was going down. The tannin is there basically to tell the birds to bug off until the seeds get ripe enough, because the tannin in the skins makes it bitter for any creatures that want to eat the grapes, whether it's birds in France or wild boar in Tuscany. They don't want to eat it until the skins are actually ripe. And so what happens is we get this impression of something a little bit vegetal in places where they don't get super ripe. Like, you can have wines from Australia's Barossa Valley or Napa or Argentina and Mendoza, where they're trying to impress Parker or whoever's writing about them, where they let the grapes get overripe and you don't feel the tannins. In these wines, where they're trying to keep a little bit of acidity, you get that slightly vegetal, slightly savory character. And if we want to go one step further to say very basically what tannin is, when was the last time you drank some tea where you left the tea bag steeping too long in your tea, and all of a sudden the tea got bitter and got very dry? That is the same thing. That's anthocyanins that comes from those leaves. And it's the same thing that we have in these skins in wine. I hope I made sense.
Thank you. That's helpful.
What I will say is this: if it wasn't for the tannin in these Bordeaux, you wouldn't be able to age the wines and find different aromas evolving and different flavors coming up, because the wines would fall apart. They would oxidize. All you have to do to believe me is buy a bottle of 1997 vintage Cabernet Sauvignon from the Napa Valley. 1997 was a particularly hot vintage. The wines now are dead. Sorry, Mr. Baker, if there are many on your list, I'm sure that they're the best ones. But a lot of the wines no longer are good because they didn't have the tannin, they didn't have the acidity, and they flattened. But the Bordeaux wines, you might find them a little bit Gallic in their not so friendly character in the first 10 years. But as they get to know you and you get to know them, all of a sudden you become best friends. It's a little bit of that European, I'm not going to like you until I really understand who you are, get to know you, versus the American, hey friend, how are you? See you later.
Hey, Philippe.
Yes.
So if we if we like Bordeaux blends, what other parts of the world, regions, put out good Bordeaux blends and at good values?
I love this question. So it gives me the opportunity to tell you a very quick story about how I discovered wine. I grew up in a French family, or at least, my mom defined our family. She's French. We spent a lot of time every single summer in France as children. And from the age of 10, they were putting wine into our little Duralex glass of water. Turns out my grandparents were very cheap and the wine was terrible and I hated wine. And then when I was working in finance, I had the opportunity to go to South Africa, and I was drinking beer in the Stellenbosch because I didn't know any better. And then my boss flew over and we went out for a dinner, and he knew his way around the wine lists in South Africa because he had been there a bunch of times. And he ordered a Bordeaux blend from the Stellenbosch from a producer named Meer Lust. And the wine was Meer Lust Rubicon 1988. And I said to my girlfriend at the time, because I thought it was so delicious, it was just so delicious. I said, when we get back to New York, we're going to take a wine class. And that was a great thing because we've been married now for just about 25 years. It all worked out well. The trip to South Africa together, the wine, the whole thing. So we see very good Bordeaux blends from a few producers in South Africa. We see them in Tuscany. You know, our friends in Tuscany, the folks at Sassicaia, it's actually not a blend. Sassicaia is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, but Ornellaia produces a beautiful blend. There are a number of producers in Italy who do it. We see some very good ones. I think the best ones in the United States are actually from Washington State. There's out in the east where the wheat is tall and the grape growing is hot and dry. There's some very good Bordeaux blends from Washington State. You do need to be in places where there is some heat. I taught a class Wednesday for Columbia on Australia, and it's not quite a Bordeaux blend. Historically, actually, it is. I'll give you the detail. But we had a fantastic Cabernet Shiraz from the McLaren Vale in Australia. And I call that a Bordeaux blend because back in the 19th century, Bordeaux used to bring in wine from the Rhone Valley. They used to bring in Syrah to boost their wines because they were having a hard time getting things ripe. So they went and they got Syrah to give their wines a little bit of oomph. But the point, Mr. Fabros, is that you need, for a Bordeaux blend, you need to be somewhere where there is some warmth. It can have cool breezes like it does in Bordeaux, but you have to have a combination of terroir factors, whether it's the gravel, free draining soils, or whatever. You have to have some warmth. Otherwise, Cabernet does not get ripe. And I will tell you, as an example, the reason I left my job as the tastings director at Wine and Spirits Magazine, which was my first job in wine, I was fortunate enough to pass this exam that Laura described earlier. And I was also willing to accept basically an 80% haircut to get my first job in wine out of finance. It was like going to grad school again. I left the second time that we had to taste the quote unquote value priced Chilean wines. And I'm sure Mr. John Baker doesn't have to taste that stuff. He has people to do that. But it was like drinking green bell pepper salad. It was so unpleasant because none of the grapes were fully ripe. So you need to be somewhere where things can get ripe.
Cabernet that's closest to this is the Meer Lust Rubicon.
Meer Lust Rubicon is absolutely, Mrs. Richardson, is one of my favorite wines.
That's one of our favorites. Yeah. That's
Pardon
great.
me?
That is one of our favorites as well.
It's one of your favorites as well.
Right.
Well-heeled wine drinkers, clearly. So just to finish up with Saint-Emilion, it is unlike Saint-Julien, where you know what you're getting. Saint-Emilion is a big hodgepodge. It's a much larger area. There are people in good neighborhoods for growing. There are people down in the sandy lots that really don't produce very good stuff, and yet are allowed to call it Grand Cru. It's a big hodgepodge. So you need to pay a little bit more attention when it comes to Saint-Emilion. And here's the list of the best wines that I mentioned earlier. I would just note, for those of you who want to discover things, Chateau Figeac in Saint-Emilion is one of my absolute favorite properties in Bordeaux, and it is highly unusual because it's mostly Cabernet. but it's in this particular place where, no surprise, there are very deep gravel hills, and that's why it's mostly Cabernet. So you grow according to what the soil tells you to grow. And here are some labels. And for those of you who have had it, Chateau Ozon, mon Dieu, just drink it. Don't talk about it. Just smell it, drink it. It is just phenomenal. Same thing with Cheval Blanc. Angelus is our James Bond wine. Great product placement, but not my favorite wine. Pavie and...
We're not seeing the labels.
Oh, you're not seeing the labels? No?
Yes, yes, we are.
You are. So,
Yes,
okay.
we can see them.
You can see them? Good.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yes.
Very nice. Works
Yeah.
of art. Thank you.
Chateau Angelus has the famous bell. Their second wine is called Carillon or Carillon of Angelus. But truly, the greats here are Chateau Ozon, Cheval Blanc, and Saint-Emilion. Excuse me, and Figeac. And then finally, just to talk a little bit about Grand Corbin d'Espagne, we are off in the northwest section of Saint-Emilion, over by Pomerol. It is nice to know that these folks are organic. This is becoming, as things warm up, it's easier to become organic. There's less disease pressure from humidity. So more and more properties in Bordeaux are becoming organic. And as you can see here, 74% Merlot. This is a Merlot wine. And that gives it that caressing texture. Yep. I think I have one more slide. I'm not sure if it's there, but Laura has seen a different presentation where the various appellations of Bordeaux are compared to the actors who have played James Bond. So if you would like to take 30 seconds and think about these three wines, if you need to retaste them, I will not stop you. Each one, I hope, showed a different personality. The Saint-Julien, as I said, kind of classic, but at the same time suave, elegant. The Saint-Estèphe, a little bit harder, a little bit more mineral, not as bouncy and not as much sort of generous fruit. And then finally, the Saint-Emilion, which was much more caressing, easier, much more approachable, easier to drink on its own. And think about James Bond. We're going to get there in a moment. This is sort of the recap. Saint-Julien, balanced and elegant. Saint-Estèphe, sort of more brutish and raw. And Saint-Emilion, softer. Who could be?
I found the Saint-Estèphe softer than the Saint-Emilion.
Did you really?
I did.
I'm going to go back.
Yes, have some more.
The stuff was very pleasing.
I will take any excuse to have a little bit more. I understand that my dinner this evening is not beef bourguignon. My wife worked all day and she said, we're getting pizza. I said, I did not attend Yale University where you can drink fine wine with pizza. I would like something a little bit, and then I stopped because we're going into the weekend and I don't want to get myself in trouble this early. If I go back to the Saint-Estèphe, the aroma is a little bit barnyardy. It's a little bit country.
Okay.
I agree. The Saint-Estèphe was soft.
It's soft at the beginning, but then
Okay.
my tongue dries up. Focus on the finish. Your tongue, you're probably eating.
Well,
I think you probably have a plate of really good cheese. That's only a guess, but I think
Yeah.
that might be
But Italian sausage, so it's a little harsh, a little strong, right?
a little bit on the finish, right? It's a little bit.
Yeah. I sort of
So
like.
let me ask you.
Yeah.
It's a little bit lean. It's a little bit.
It's lean, which is why I like it.
Which actor who plays James Bond is a little bit lean and a little bit tough on the finish? Who would that
Daniel,
Yeah, I think so. And then Saint-Julien is kind of classic, as I said, and there's a certain easy elegance about it, and a little bit softer, a little bit pretty boy. Who might that be?
I say Daniel.
Daniel Craig again? You're clearly a
Oh, again. Oh, I'm sorry. You heard me the first time.
I did.
Me the first time.
These ears were made for listening. So Saint-Julien classic, but not Pauillac. Pauillac is the ultimate classic. We didn't have a Pauillac this evening because it has not been sainted. We're only on the saints. Pauillac is Sean Connery. Pauillac has longevity. It can last forever. It's the as they say in the hood, it's the OG. It's the original, right? But Saint-Julien is almost there, but it's a little bit softer. And then Saint-Emilion is a little bit of a joke because everything is Grand Cru. It's a little bit sweeter. It's easy. You don't need anything else with it. You can just sit back, not think, enjoy it. This is broad brushstroke, right? But here we go. Are you ready for the reveal, everybody? I know I've gone over time. There we go. Is Roger Moore, elegant, classic, but not tough. Our far right here is our friend, the most recent, and that is Saint-Estèphe. And in the middle, it's a little bit of a joke because everything is Grand Cru and it doesn't bite hard, baby. It's a little bit softer. And then, I had to think outside the box and I came up with our good friend. Oh, with those awful teeth. Yeah, Austin Powers. So those are our three saints of Bordeaux. And I thank you for letting me go over time, but I hope you enjoyed the wines. And I hope the presentation was somewhat intelligible. I promise I didn't have anything to drink before I started this presentation. I am a lightweight.
Thank you. That was terrific. Fabulous.
Yep.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Philip.
Cheers. Cheers. 3 cheers.
Merci. Au revoir. Tout à l'heure.
Cheers, all.
Let's all go to Bordeaux together.
Wait,
Okay.
there's members of the program, no?
Yeah, Philippe, you're going to share the slide deck?
I will share the slide deck. Yes, I will make sure that there are no spelling errors. I apologize.
You know, Terry has to make good on organizing a trip for us to Bordeaux, and Philippe, maybe we'll all chip in and bring you. How's that?
Oh my God.
Cheers to Bordeaux, and
I'm with you.
Here's
Debbie
to
and
it.
Terry organizing a great trip.
It was great. It was wonderful to see everybody, and
Yes.
I recently had a big birthday, which I'm still dealing with, but so far so good. It's been okay.
I'm starting to be proud of how long I've lasted, so I'm no longer hiding it.
I know. So we, having had foie gras and cheese, are now going to go eat some dinner. So we're going to sign off. It was great to see everybody, and let's have another one. I love this. It was great.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you.
Oh,
All right.
Philippe, before you sign off, can I just abuse your generosity for
Please.
one more second as you take this tour around Bordeaux? Can you make a few comments about your home ground, Pomerol?
Oh yes, of course. And by the way, before I forget, there are a few people who wrote me. I thought that Terry had a great idea with the Antiques Roadshow of wine, and a few people wrote me about some wines that they were hoping to get comments on. So if you want to stay on, I'll be more than happy to comment on those. With regards to Pomerol, so Pomerol is this place. I'm gonna scroll back, and again, look away from the screen for a moment so that you don't get dizzy. But I'm gonna come back up to our map, and so here we are. Pomerol, it's very difficult to see, I guess. Saint-Emilion is over here, and Pomerol is this teeny tiny little place right next to it. It's very small. It's a very small appellation, kind of a backwater. There's a church, there's a gymnasium and a school, and I don't think there's even a place to buy food in Pomerol. It's very, very small. It's never been classified. Most of the properties are owned by families. If they decided to do a classification, there would probably be some sort of internecine warfare, because I'm sure that there's been a lot of commingling. But Pomerol is, imagine Saint-Emilion warmer. It's warmer than Saint-Emilion. Why? Because they don't have the limestone. They have a lot of clay, which is ideal for Merlot. They have some gravel. So clay, we're going to see Merlot planted. Gravel, that's where Cabernet Franc is going to be planted. One of the reasons that Pomerol, and I have this wonderful book here, actually holding up my laptop. This book, which I'm teasing you because it's out of print, but here we go. This great book, Pomerol, by Neil Martin, who is the Bordeaux critic for Venice. Pomerol has never been classified, and all the properties are very small. So one of the things about that fascinates folks is that, at least people who look at value or not value, is that Pomerol wines tend to be quite expensive. And the reason that they tend to be quite expensive is because yes, rough. It's rough. Expensive. They are wines that have wonderful richness. Again, it's warmer than Saint-Emilion, but they manage to maintain they maintain their elegance, generally speaking, because they add Cabernet Franc, which is a high acid grape that that supports the freshness of their wines. But these are Merlots that are just at the edge of being too much. They are exotic. They are texturally rich. And for some reason, maybe it's because there's a component of iron in the clay. These are old clays. There are iron, there are literally threads of iron in many parts of Pomerol that supposedly, and no one understands this scientifically, but they understand it organoleptically from tasting it. The iron seems to give a little bit of backbone to these very rich Merlots.
Maybe it's the closeness of the gymnasium.
Maybe it's the closest of the gymnasium.
I'm gonna leave.
Aroma, yeah. Pomerol, when it's young, is often described as being on the nose, having a nose of bitter chocolate, like very high purity cocoa, dark chocolate, right? With age, and this is the part that's fascinating, with age, Pomerols become very, very truffly, like black truffle. And that is, I mean, truffles to human beings are what catnip is to cats, right? Or at least to culinary mavens who love that sort of thing. So small quantities, mysterious, never classified, this wonderful sort of textural, inviting character, but yet still with a sense of uprightness, a sense of dignity. I would love to, if you'll indulge me, I'll tell a very quick story. When I joined the Moex family to run this project in the U.S., I was invited to France, and I had the opportunity to eat at the family home, and they started with white Burgundy. It was very funny. They said, you know, white Bordeaux is okay. It's okay if you're having oysters, but if you're having proper food, you should have white Burgundy. And then they poured from a decanter the red wine. And I thought, oh, okay, it's going to, you know, maybe it'll be Petrus. I mean, they hired me. They seem to like me. Maybe it'll be Petrus. And I took one smell of the wine and I said, my gosh, what is going on here? These people are so open-minded. They're serving Chateau Lafite. I mean, this smells exactly like Chateau Lafite. And I'm not saying, I was the tasting director at a wine magazine making no money, okay? That was the Benny. I got to taste that stuff. I'm not being a snob. It's just, that was the equation. So I'm smelling this thing and I'm saying, it's cedary. It has these dark fruits. There's a character of sort of graphite, you know, that number 2 pencil that I kept erasing on my SAT. It smells like that graphite. It's Chateau Lafite. It was Chateau Petrus. It was Petrus from a bad vintage from 2002, which is a terrible vintage. That's why they're pouring at the family house to like just the employees, because they're like, let's get rid of this stuff. It smelled so beautifully, aromatically nuanced and dark and mysterious, because interestingly, there are certain types of clay that are so dense that they do not allow the plant to really take root. And so the poor plant cannot produce a lot of grapes. And so those grapes are super concentrated and they have very thick skins. So this is a place where we have Merlot that has a lot of tannin. Highly unusual. You do not find this anywhere else. And so it's just this little microcosm of very, very unusual wines. And you saw how thick that book is. The book is thicker than the phone book in Pomerol. It's a very small place that produces very particular wines. That was my little poem.
So let's go to Doris Grippo.
What's that?
Let's go to Doris Grippo.
Terry wanted
Go
me
to Doris.
Hi, Terry. Philippe, I have to confess something. First of all, I'm a member of the Chevalier de Tastevin, the
Yes.
Burgundy wine group. But I
was once a member, but they kicked me out.
I do have a soft spot in my heart for Bordeaux, however. But one of my fellow Chevaliers sent me something the other day, and I thought I'd pass this on in this time of Corona. You know, we're supposed to be keeping track of our symptoms, and you can't always get tested. But one of the things to look for is if you can still.
I know exactly, Doris. I'm not going to ruin it because I know the punchline. Please go. I think this is fantastic.
So what you need to do every day, at least before dinner, maybe during dinner, after dinner, you want to pick up your wine. You want to sniff it. Yeah, I can still smell it. And then you want to taste it, and do that several times a day. And as long as you can smell and sniff, you'll be in good shape.
And I think they said if you should do it when you wake up in the morning, just to make
Yeah,
sure.
probably at lunchtime too. Philippe, I have to tell you another story. Years ago, I had an investment meeting that was in conjunction with the Cannes Film Festival. And at the end, there was a Frenchman who offered to take all of us to a wine festival the following Saturday. So we went to it. It was in Cap d'Antibes. We tasted all these wines, and then he took us to a sort of ceremony. It was like a wine induction. And all these, they were all men. They were dressed in like red robes. And as one fellow was getting intronized, there was a huge cheer. And I thought, God, he must be like the local, I don't know, soccer coach or something. Well, it turned out it was Roger Moore, James Bond, and he was getting intronized into the Chevalier in the south of France.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Those ceremonies are always fun. You know, I've been to a few of those ceremonies, and I have asked chevaliers to please lift up their robes to see if, like good Scotsmen, and they're like, no, we're not doing that.
I have one. I've been to the ceremony at the Clos de Vougeot, which is something.
The Clos de Vougeot, in which is basically the fraternity house of Burgundy, that I've the good fortune of working with a lot of great restaurants. I have never seen 500 people be served in such a synchronized way.
Exactly.
In one room, œufs en meurette, this delicate dish of poached eggs with red wine and bake of lardon and all that stuff. They've got it down. That is a bucket list thing to do, is to be invited to a dinner at the frat house of the Burgundy order known as the Clos de Vougeot. Yeah, great spot. I think Terry, if I cannot see Terry, my screen has somehow gotten a little bit off, but I think there was going to be some discussion of what's going on in Napa. Possibly.
Yeah, so well, first of all, we wanted Doris to show you the label for the Bordeaux wine that you were going to critique.
Oh, yes.
We were going to have Naomi do a little bit of a conversation. We're going to have Naomi talk about sort of what's going on in in Napa with the fires, but let's go back to Doris.
Okay.
If we could stop sharing the slides, we
Right.
could probably get
Oh,
everybody
yes,
on
yes,
on
yes.
the full
Good call.
screen.
Good call. One moment. I'm going to try and get rid of this stuff. I have a
Just stop sharing.
I've never seen this before.
Stop sharing.
Up at the top, there should be a stop sharing.
Yeah, the Zoom screen has decided
Stop
to
sharing.
somehow. Okay, here we go. I'm going to stop sharing it. And vous êtes en train de partager votre écran. Arrêtez. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we
Well,
go away?
Yes.
We haven't had this yet.
So this
Okay.
is this
We got this at a WGBH auction.
so it's the Malesco Saint-Exupéry, yes?
Yes.
And the appellation is Margot.
We.
Oui. So just taking a sort of the bird's eye view, wait a minute, you haven't opened it? You're not going to drink it?
Well, we already had 3 bottles open, Philippe. I mean.
It sounds like the beginning of a Friday night. Doris,
Yeah.
what is the vintage again? Please remind me.
1999.
Okay.
99.
99. So Malesco Saint-Exupéry, 99. Let's first talk about the vintage. So actually, let's first talk about Margot. I said earlier, Margot is actually the closest appellation of the Medoc to the city of Bordeaux, and therefore it has more classified growths than any other appellation in the 1855 classification. This seems normal. It was easy for the merchants of Bordeaux to get to Margot without too much effort, so they knew these wines very well. Secondly, Margot, with its gravel and pebbly and sandy soils, produces wines that are notable for their ripeness, but also for their finesse. Whenever you have sand, it makes for very easy water draining, and we get the skins on the grapes riper more easily. And with this female name of Margot, this is a very French thing. I'm sorry if anyone takes this the wrong way, but they would say the wines are much more feminine. They're much more feminine because they get ripe easily, and therefore any grape that ripens easily but not too quickly has very nice aromatics. And Margot is famous for having very sort of perfumed wines, and therefore it's easy to remember girl's name Margot, perfume. So lovely wines, lovely aromatics, very popular, many classified wines in Margot. 1999 was not the vintage that the subsequent vintage was. 2000, for many reasons, was considered to be one of these epic vintages. Primary reason was the famous 000. Fun story. Our owner, Monsieur Moex, did a lot of handshake deals even before the grapes were picked, because he loves to play poker. He loves to take positions, and he decided 2000 is going to be special. This is going to be, he knew that the growing season was pretty good, and he said, I'm going to go ahead and take a flyer on this. I'm going to buy as much of it as I can. And interestingly, I still have probably more 2000 Margot than 2000 Bordeaux than Mr. Baker does at wine.com. Sorry, I'm not trying to, we just bought the house. We bought the house. And so 1999 is what we call in Bordeaux a shadow vintage. 1999 is a very good vintage. It was not as hot as it was in 2000. The 2000s, despite having a huge reputation, took a number of years to come around. It was a fairly dry season, and the tannins were a little bit rough, and they needed time to sort of resolve. So 1999, this is so great that you brought this wine. 1999 was the vintage that Monsieur Paul Pontellier who was the famous winemaker at Chateau Margaux for many, many years. He unfortunately passed away, I think it was in 2015, so 5 years ago now. Paul passed away, too young. 1999 was the vintage that he served to me the last 2 times that I visited with him, because he felt that 1999 was a much more beautiful and approachable vintage than 2000. 2000 was a little bit too masculine in an appellation that is known for being more feminine. So it was a little bit of a conflict. Not as hot, but absolutely ripe with very sort of suave tannins and good bracing acidity. 1999 is a vintage of finesse in Margaux. Now, on to Malescaut Saint-Exupéry. Saint-Exupéry, as we all know, the writer of Le Petit Prince. Malescaut is a property that I'm trying to recall, and this is terrible because without Google at my fingertips, I'm going to have to, I'm trying to remember if it is a Cru Bourgeois or if it's actually a classified growth. And
it's a third Troisième, third growth.
It's a third growth. See, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. And it must be because the Moix family does not, it's entirely possible that they don't have a good relationship with the family that owns Malescaut, because it's never been in my book since I started back in 2012. And here we go. Let me go ahead and just pull something up here. So third growth, which is absolutely respectable, very nice vintage. And I want to see if I can prompt myself. Here we go. Malescaut is yeah, it's another sort of semi-young property. It only dates back to 1616 in the registry. It's terrible. I'm using crib notes. Did anyone do that at graduate school? That's not right. Never, ever. It is not a small estate. It's a fairly large estate. And the vintage is 1999. So it was purchased, the current ownership has owned it since 1955, 30 hectares. So it's not huge, 50, at least by Left Bank standards, 50% Cabernet, 35% Merlot, 10% Cabernet Franc, 5% Petit Verdot. And we are on gravel, chalk, and clay soils on gentle slopes. The gravel can be quite deep. The vines are 35 years of age. The older the vines, the better. Malescaut Saint-Exupéry is generally considered to be sort of in the middle of the pack for Margaux wines. 1999, because it is such a fine vintage, is it's not a vintage of major power. So if you wanted to open a 4th bottle of wine tonight, I would say don't hesitate. If you were thinking of keeping it for another 20 years, I would say don't do that. I think that rather than going for a stick au poivre, I would probably do a very nice roast chicken or perhaps a cold lamb salad, although that's not really appropriate to this time of year. Yeah, it's going to be a wine.
Maybe rack of lamb.
Rack of lamb would be great, but I would not.
Hamburgers on lettuce.
Well, sorry, what on lettuce?
Lamb burgers on lettuce.
Lamb burgers on lettuce, or rack of lamb without too much of a char, and don't put in too many herbs or garlic, because this wine is going to be a wine of finesse that is not going to shoulder up to anything that's too powerful. I would use food that is going to frame the wine and let the wine shine. There are certain wines that want to go head to head. This is a wine that I really think should be allowed to, it's going to speak softly. So don't make things too loud. I would go food wise, I would be more gentle. In fact, you know what might surprise you is you might really enjoy a good flaky piece of codfish with some mushrooms, a little mushroom bouillon with some bobbing little wild mushrooms could be really, really good, because you get that sort of steak texture of that wonderful fish, but then you get the earthy notes of the mushrooms. That could be good. I would not put it up against anything too powerful.
I have to tell you, years ago, we were in Sicily and we met a restaurant owner who was sipping some red wine while he was talking about fish dishes. And he said he never met a Sicilian fisherman who drank white wine with fish. It was only red wine with fish. And so that we always have red wine with our fish.
Well, you know, I would not put Chateau Latour up against any,
No, right.
unless it was a great white shark, but it is true that we don't think about it. But if you have, you know, what you have to do is you have to taste the, again, this is the great thing about Bordeaux. You can taste it and you can drink it 2 hours later. So you can go ahead and you can taste it and then ask yourself the question, okay, what food do I want to have with this in 2 hours? And that's probably enough time to prepare the meal.
Hey, Philippe, so if we've enjoyed what we've heard and what we've tasted, and we like these blends, would you recommend our joining something like the Commanderie?
The Commanderie de Bordeaux?
Yes.
Where are you, Mr. Favros?
New York.
You're in New York. So are you a member of the Commanderie de Bordeaux?
No.
Or can I speak openly, or should I be careful?
No, a friend of mine, it says I should join. So I you know, they all dress up funny and all that stuff. You know,
They do. They drink very, very good wine. It's a little bit one of those clubs where it's a little bit alpha. It's a little bit alpha, and there are people who kind of know something about wine, but they're more in the club because it's something special. That said, one of the greatest dinners I have ever attended was a Cheval Blanc retrospective at the Metropolitan Club. It was the annual Edwardian dinner of the Commanderie, and I had to go out and I own 2 tuxedos, but I had to go out and rent white tie because that was de rigueur for that dinner. But given that I was a guest and they were pouring all these crazy vintages of Cheval Blanc, I said, yeah, okay, no problem. I'll rent the white tie.
Yeah.
No, they're a group. They did a dinner where they took out the Le Bernardin's wine bar about 2 months ago, and they had Chateau Latour, Chateau Margaux, Du Cru Beaucaillou. It was about 5 or 6 of these chateaus of very top level, all from older vintages. And I watched this stuff coming out of the boxes, and I thought, how can I get invited? They took the room, and they knew that they wouldn't have too many people coming because of COVID, and they just went ahead and they what's the word? Looted the cellar. So it's a good group of people to hang out with if you want to drink some really great wines. You may have to listen to some bluster at the dinner table. If you're good at doing that, then or at sort of blocking it out, yeah, it
sounds like it's better to be a guest than to be a member. Yeah?
Being a guest, I have found in life, is actually, that's why I try and work on my charm, because honestly, no commitment and all benefit. So being a guest can often be, I've probably revealed what a rapscallion I am, but
Take a sip and enjoy.
so far it's worked for me.
It's like friends with boats.
That's right. Good idea.
What is the name, Philippe, of that group? Is it Meritage? Of all of those, is that what it's called? You know, all these Bordeaux blend growers.
Oh, the Meritage is a term that was invented in Napa to try and get people excited about Bordeaux blends.
Yeah.
and it was maybe 10 years too early. There are more people now who are doing Bordeaux blends in Napa and are very successful with them. But 10, 15 years ago, people just wanted their Cabernet Sauvignon. You know, Bordeaux blends weren't really capturing people's imagination back then. And now people like, I'm trying to remember, Bill Harland, who owns Bond Winery, he does some beautiful stuff. And you know, there are a number of people who do beautiful blends, but it is amazing. We live in a country where I like to, sometimes I'm a little bit blunt. We're still in the Baskin Robbins phase. We still need our 31 flavors. We don't want to mix chocolate and vanilla. We just want our chocolate or our vanilla or our strawberry, and we need to know the flavor. You know, when you think about it, when you go to a restaurant in the United States and order a wine by the glass, it is defined by the grape variety. If you go to a restaurant in France or in Italy or in Spain, it is defined by the region. And that's basically a little indicator that we are still geographically challenged in terms of what is best from where in the United States. And as a very quick test, I often ask my students when I teach the West Coast wine class, okay, California wine, what percentage of California wine do you all think comes from Napa? And I typically get double-digit numbers, and sometimes it's like 40 or 50%. And I tell my students it's 3%, but it's one of the very, very few names, geographically speaking, that we know in the United States, because this is still a young country. You know, the Judgment of Paris, which basically brought California wines to the fore and turned Napa into a monoculture. They used to plant potatoes and other things in Napa. That was in 1976. I mean, we have literally been an active luxury wine market for only 45 years. That is just a grain of sand compared to Italy, Enotria, as the Greeks called it, Greece, the Caucasus, Spain, France.
Philippe, can I just break in?
Yeah.
As a class, we had an off-site, off-year reunion in Napa.
Yes.
How many of us that are here attended? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
There were we had 125. We had 125 people attend Napa, and we actually had to tell people they couldn't. After the 125, and we changed venues 3 times, we said we're done at 125.
Yeah, Harvard said that we might get 50 classmates and a certain number of spouses, but we just blew the numbers away. And we, I think for me, the most enjoyable one was the first night. Is that we had dinner in one of the cellars. CELLERS, and we got to make our own blends.
Oh, what fun!
And we had them judged, which was very interesting. But
Philippe, we had to do the blending of the wines, and then we went downstairs and we had this beautiful dinner with linen tablecloths, you know, next to the casks. And then the chief guy came down, and he'd done all the chemical assays of what we had done by way of blending.
Okay.
And he said, "You people need to keep your day job."
My group came in second. We wrote down what we thought the percentage should be. We put it in. We never tasted it. We just submitted it. We came in second.
It was theoretical.
Well, we sort of knew that, you know, a Bordeaux blend of Sauvignon and a little bit of Merlot and Franc and so forth would probably be okay. and it turned out to be. Well, we had a wonderful weekend. We had a Saturday night dinner at Scott Cook's house, and where the wine was provided by Turley Wine Vineyards,
Oh, Turley, sure.
and he was there.
Mr. Turley was there.
He was there talking about the wines, which was very interesting. And it was just and Scott's house just overlooked the valley. You could almost see from end to end. It was just wonderful, and it's one of those things that it's, you know, when you think back on it, it was really something.
Yeah.
And one of these, which is, and that's why I always go to all the offsite reunions, because you never know what's going to happen. And a lot of them are wonderful things. And it would have been really great to go to Bordeaux in this year, maybe next year, maybe whatever. We'll see. But this has really turned out to be a very wonderful thing, you know, and it's very nice to taste things.
Ken, let's go to Naomi, who can give us an update about all the fires in Napa and sort of what she experienced and what John Zakin just went through.
Okay.
Naomi, it's yours.
Thank you. First, as a way of a correction, Terry and I were one of the organizers of the Napa reunion. It was 9 months in the making. I ran into Scott Cook one night at a wine bar. We had a drink together. I told him that I had sold a home on over 100 acres, which is where the main events were, on top of the Crystal Springs Road in St. Helena. And that's where the main events were. Scott Cook lives in Woodside, which is far south of San Francisco. The home that was mentioned belonged to John Zakin on the North Fork of Crystal Springs Road. And that actually, and I sold him the home. And Philippe Melka, famous winemaker, is his winemaker. And that was the site of the start of the Napa fires. Exactly where John's house was is where it began. So I'll get to that in a minute, but since everyone has been digressing, I wanted to digress on two very quick things relating to Bordeaux. Those who may not know me, I am an avowed Francophile. I went to college in France. I was a French literature major. In 1985, when the franc hit 10 to the dollar, my husband and I bought a piece of land just behind the Cap d'Antibes. We built a home between two medieval villages, which I have to this day. And I spend 2 to 3 months a year there. So I use it as a base. I know France better than I know California, where I'm currently living. But in any case, last September, I went to Bordeaux, and French friends of mine offered me a key to their condo on the beach on an island off the coast of Bordeaux. So for those of you planning a trip to Bordeaux, and if you love oysters, the name of this island is Cap Ferret. It produces 60% of all oysters eaten in France. I had oysters for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's called dégustation, and it's served with white wine from Graves. So as you were speaking, it brought back memories. I can't wait to go back. I was supposed to be there again this fall, but it was a wonderful experience, highly recommended. And when you speak about finesse and elegance, those oysters from the Bay d'Arcachon are just a different taste experience, and the wines are terrific. So I wanted to put a plug in for that island if anyone is planning a trip to Bordeaux.
It's magical. It truly is. It is for the well-heeled chateau owners of Bordeaux. That is their Hamptons. That is where they go in the summer.
Yeah, it was terrific.
And Naomi, is that like near where the sand dunes are?
Yes, yeah, exactly. The famous dunes are there. So then regarding something a little closer to home regarding Bordeaux, and I know that Philippe will find this maybe something he doesn't know. French friends of mine are one of the family members who own a winery in St. Helena called Flora Springs. Their red is quite famous. It's called Trilogy. Their white wine is called Soliloquy. And they, about a week ago, decided to move out of St. Helena to the town of Napa because they're opening up another wine division there. And they asked me, because I work as a real estate broker, to list their home. The interesting part of this story is that the Gomez family of Flora Springs own 300 acres in and around St. Helena toward Zinfandel Lane. And they, in March, the first week of March, they sold 60 acres to the French family from Bordeaux who owned Chateau Smith Haute Lafitte. So it's the Catillard is their name.
Yep.
They paid 60 million. And this is, you know, in the public record, they paid 60 million for 60 acres of the Gomez's 300 acres. And they got in touch with me because I was introduced by the Flora Springs owners as someone who both speaks French and also has a home that they might be interested renting while they're transitioning. So I've been in touch with them. They also, apart from owning the chateau, they own the Spa Caudalie next door, which is a wonderful spa with products made from grapes. And so you might want to keep tabs on this one. I'm sure they're planting now. I was at their vineyard last week. I'm sure it'll, I don't know what the name will be, maybe the Catillard, Chateau Catillard, but it will be a wonderful addition to the Napa Valley wines, I'm sure. And you may want to keep tabs on that Bordeaux family now developing land in the Napa Valley. When I purchased my land, I have small acreage, but enough. I have a vineyard and barns from the 1800s. I make my own wine. It's kind of a Côte d'Or blend, a red blend. But when I purchased a number of years out of HBS, there were 40 wineries in the Napa Valley. Today, there are 500. And anyone coming, feel free to reach out to me. I have a fabulous map I call my Bible that I give to friends and family who come up to visit. It's an amazing map that covers everything. And it's been a tremendous transformation. So one of the properties I sold 20 years ago was the 100+ acres to John and Jan Zakin, which is where the fires began. Really, really frightening to me. The property, for those of you who saw it, because we also got Turley to pour, and we did many other things. It was one of 3 days. I also got the former chefs of the French Laundry to prepare all of our meals for 3 days.
Wow.
There was a reason that 100
And they don't cater anything.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's a reason that 125 people signed up in the first 24 hours that it went live. We had to cut it off. So there was 9 months of preparation, and it was just a phenomenal event. But I sold this acreage to Jonathan Zakin. The fires broke out there on September 27th. And it was, the story is very harrowing. They, Jan, ran out with just her underwear on, she said on the Channel 7 News. And their dog died, unfortunately, from burns, but they barely made it out. Fortunately, their house actually survived, which is really remarkable. They've had to move out because of smoke damage, but very little burned on their property, and they're very, very fortunate. My property is right by the Meadowood Resort. So
Sure.
Meadowood was badly hit.
Yes.
The restaurant, the 3-star restaurant burned, many other things burned at Meadowood, and 20 of the individual houses, which were their hotel rooms, 20 of the 80 burned. The fire came to my road 3 times in 10 days. 8 firefighting trucks managed to stave off the fires from my property. I'm so grateful, but unfortunately, 300 homes in the Napa Valley were destroyed, 300 homes in Sonoma, and 31 wineries either were burned or were damaged. It began, as I said, on September 27th. I was evacuated on September 28th, and the fire was not contained until October 20th. So there were embers and all kinds of activity going on for a good 3 weeks, and very frightening. It burned almost 70,000 acres of 1,500 structures, and I said between the 2 valleys, 600 homes. And of the wineries, Some were burned to the ground, like Chateau Boswell, which is close to me, and others were just damaged. But when you drive up the Silverado Trail, to the left and the right, you see crews now taking down trees that are burnt, and vineyards. I've never seen burnt vineyards. I thought by being on the valley floor in the middle of vineyards that I would be safe. But the fire actually crossed from the trail over to 29. It was ferocious. Wow. And went up Spring Mountain Road, as you probably know, because some of the wineries on Spring Mountain Road were damaged or destroyed. All the way up to Pride is at the very top of Spring Mountain Road, half in Sonoma, half in Napa. So it was just catastrophic. Everyone I know is still in fire trauma, shock over it. And I have photos taken from my pool in the back deck of my house where the fire was coming at me. And I texted my kids. They said, "Mom, don't take any photos. Do not take anything with you. Just get in the car and leave." And I never thought I would pull up my driveway and see my place again. Really, really frightening. And I'm in the city limits of St. Helena. I'm just on the north side by the Silverado Trail. Across the road from me is Harlan and, Meadowood. So yeah. I'm directly across. I could walk to Harlan or to Meadowood. And it was just a very, very frightening thing. And it literally just in the last week was contained.
Naomi, may I ask you a quick question? Because a friend of mine, Brian Baker, I don't know if you know Brian, but he was at Chateau Montelena for a very long time. And then he ran for about a year. He was at Mayacamas. He told me that this year, 2020, there will be no red wine in Napa. Is that what you've heard as well?
Unless people picked before September 27th, there will be this smoke taint. Yeah. People I know actually have insured their grapes, like Flora Springs has insured their grapes, so they'll be paid. But that's my impression is if you didn't pick, you would have the smoke taint problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Mine were picked the day before. The day before the fires, my grapes were picked.
Wow.
But I can only make 1,000 bottles. I'm just more of what you'd call a home vineyard, but enough, to have fun with.
Right.
What's your label, Naomi?
La Buona Stella.
That's great. The good star.
Any questions? Terry has my contact info. Terry's been a guest at my property. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to arrange whatever I can for you there with great pleasure.
Naomi, do you think there's an effect in terms of the smoke and ash getting into the soil, or will that wash away over the next year in time to not have an effect on next year's harvest?
I really don't know. I would assume that the heavy rains coming in the winter would get rid of whatever ash residue there might be. Honestly, I don't think it's that significant. I mean, on my property, there was not enough ash to really.
I guess anything vintage 2020 will be known as smoky. So that's a bad joke.
Yeah. No, I don't think, like you said, I don't think they're making much red wine unless it was picked pre-September 27th. Yeah, but to see the sky and the photos I have just black and the fires, it's just cataclysmic. The feeling, you just didn't know if it would take everything. It was that overwhelming, and no one is prepared for something like that. And then in August, we had the lightning fires throughout the state. There was a huge amount of lightning in August. Fires were all over the state of California, called the LMU complex. So we're just, it's just been a very rough period.
Philip, are you in the Bay Area too?
I live in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
It's my primary residence. Yeah. But I go up to Napa, when I can, usually a couple of nights a week if I can. So, but I live and work in San Francisco. That's my primary residence. I'm originally from Manhattan. I grew up in mid-Manhattan, New York City. But after France and then HBS, I moved out to the Bay Area to try it for a year. And then a year, became decades. But I still go back to New York often.
And Philippe, you are too?
I'm a native Manhattanite, and our offices are down in Soho.
So you're in the city then?
In this, well, I'm
Wooster Street.
Worcester Street. Worcester Street. Yeah, but I live now. I live.
We have Worcester, Massachusetts, but I guess it is Wooster Street.
It is. It's spelt with 2 O's. So yeah, it is definitely a woo. But I live in New Canaan, Connecticut now because I married a lady from Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and after 12 years in Manhattan, she said there ain't enough green here, so we moved out to the burbs. Yeah. But this story in Napa, unfortunately, is going to be a recurring story. For those of us who remember in Naomi, I think it was 17. In 17, we had a number of fires also. And a good friend of mine's house was spared in Santa Rosa. But a kid from down the street here, his father is a big fan of Napa Valley wines. And he said, help my ne'er-do-well son find a job. And I helped him get a job at Chateau Montelena. And he was in a sort of, rural property with a few guys. And there were fires going on. And they got the grapes in before smoke taint really could affect it. But one day he overslept and he's like, wow, usually someone calls me when I oversleep. But it turned out that the cell tower had burned down. And so his phone didn't go off. So, this was only 3 years ago. It feels like we're moving into a cycle, which is a little bit disconcerting.
In 2007,
Overwarming.
the winds were 80 to 90 miles an hour.
Yeah.
In the fires of, and it moved it from Napa over the 101 to Sonoma.
Yeah.
That was the wind. Fortunately, with the glass fire, it actually was not windy. These were just fires that appeared and just took over because of the dryness of the brush. But in 2017, it was the wind that really was the force behind the fire.
That was the thing that impressed me in Sonoma is there was a certain randomness to what had burned. The fire had jumped the highway, which is not a small highway. And it wasn't really a tornado-like thing where what was the path of the tornado, because there were different licks of fire that were blown by the wind. But whew, I just can't, that is a very difficult situation to be living in.
Yes, it is. People are going to learn to have to be more fire safe and take precautions as best as one can for.
Yeah.
So Meadowood is building kind of 150 foot swath around the property.
Is that right?
People are removing trees and creating fire breaks now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mr. Harlan definitely has the wherewithal to do whatever he needs to do.
That's one of the cult wines. We have a few cult wines there, and that's one of them.
He's very good friends with our owner. Petrus and Harlan have a very good relationship.
Terry, it looks like Maine might outproduce Napa this year.
That's a sad story.
Yeah. There are vineyards in Maine.
So Laura,
we may do
so
another.
Laura, why don't we have you? Laura, why don't we have you wrap everything up?
Well, I think it's a testament to the fact that we're now at 9:30, which is an hour and a half longer than originally broadcast, and we have 12 hearty souls still on this Zoom. So I think, and again, yes,
the wine helps.
And
out.
we're all still drinking. Every once in a while, I see somebody raise a glass, but I just want to thank everybody. Most importantly, Philippe, for his knowledge, his humor, and just his insight. It's been great fun. I'm going to tell you right now, you have 39 witnesses to the promise to get us into Chateau Petrus if we went.
I heard that.
All 39 of you need to be together. That is the only condition.
Done. And as long as they don't pass that plonk bad vintage on us, we'll be happy to go.
Long bad vintage that tasted like Chateau Lafite. Yeah.
But just to put a
We'll
plug.
take a bad vintage anytime, Laura. Yeah.
Exactly. But Terry and I are going to send out an email in a couple days, kind of summarizing this, giving opportunities. Philippe has very kindly, and we should have said this before, offered to help consult and curate anyone who is interested in either building or adding to their Bordeaux collections. And also we will provide options to buy some of this great wine with various retailers, including Lori, as we move toward the Christmas season. I got to pull that plug in because
He works hard.
It's well earned. And so hopefully we'll all see each other in Bordeaux. That would be wonderful. But if not, please stay safe, drink well. And Philippe, again, many, many thanks.
No, it was a pleasure, Terry. It was
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Philippe.
And
Thank you,
Naomi,
thank you,
so
Philippe.
much for your
Thank you,
comments.
Laura. Thank you, Terry, and everybody else who's contributed.
Ciao. Drink well.
Happy to
It's
do
great
it
having
again.
you all. Thank you. Philippe, thank you. Thank you.
A ton
Ciao.
of fun. A ton of fun.
Mille fois merci.
À bientôt, j'espère.
Oui, oui. À la prochaine fois.
À la prochaine
Au
fois.
revoir.
Bonne
revoir.
soirée.
Bientôt, à bientôt.
Ciao.